So today we want to talk about today we want to talk about how to start thinking in English, but how to really start thinking in English. So you can speak and you can talk and have a conversation without having to make every sentence in your head and then speaking. Right? So, how do we become fluent? How do we get this thinking in English directly without translating from our language into English before speaking? And maybe you had this teacher that told you at some point, stick the name of the things on the objects. For example, door on the door and window on the window. And that doesn't really make too much sense. It doesn't bring you to speak in English directly. So how do I do this? What's the secret? What's the trick? First of all, and let me get this out of the way, you're going to have to practice. It will not be instantaneous. It will not take a week. It will take practice, but it's worth it. The practice always pays off. It's rewarding. The first thing that you want to do is have a lot of input. Yeah. So be immersed in English. And this is really important. You have to try to make all the little things that you usually do in English. Yeah. This will be the big umbrella term for today, the big covering the topic that will cover everything we will talk about today. So, inside immersion, we have different categories of things that we can do, little things that we can do. The first little thing that you can do now is change your phone settings to English so that the whole complete phone is in English. Usually, when you scroll on your phone, when you move from app to app and open and close things, you already know where things are. So you're not actively reading every word on your phone. Sometimes you need to look for something in particular and then you read, but on a day to day basis, you're basically in automatic pilot. I would love it if this were in English, so that these words that you don't actively read, you see in English, always in English. So just the word in English and all the settings, everything is English. So you see and you read English on a day to day basis. The second source of input you can have is listening, and this is really important. So, this could come from a YouTuber, it could also come from a podcaster, it could come from a singer. And listening is important, but repeating is more important. One can say listening is silver, but speaking is gold. So, one technique I want to talk about today is that of shadowing. Shadowing basically means you listen to something and you repeat it. When you repeat it, pay attention to how they say it, especially if it's somebody you like, if you like how they talk. Repeat the way they say it, repeat their intonation, repeat the little sounds that are just different to your language or that are different to the way you were saying this. Just repeat them, say them after them. It's really, really good practice. Something else you want to do, and this is at the same level, so it's not more complicated, you can totally do it, is self talk. Now, self talk, be sure you're alone. So be sure you're alone at your home or at least in the room, because I want you to speak out loud alone to yourself. So you're cooking. For example, I like cooking. And when you cook, you can start telling yourself what you're doing. So here I'm cutting these vegetables. I'm gonna put them in the water. Now I have to wait until the water is ready, etc. You talk out loud to yourself. Another option is talking about the future. So what are you gonna do in the afternoon? Or about last week? What did you do last week? What were the highlights of last week? But really, it's important to do that out loud. Out loud. If you don't know a word, you can look it up, but don't stop talking. Another way, this one you will need a bit of time. So you need to sit down and do it, but it can also work. You can use ChatGPT, right? So you can log into ChatGPT and just have a conversation, right? So you can give a prompt, something along the lines of, I would like to have a conversation with a tandem. Hello, and you start the conversation. So you ask a question and ChatGPT will answer. If you say short answer, that's better. So ChatGPT will give you an answer that's limited so you can have a conversation. Yeah, it works. It's the most natural, but it works because it's in English. Something that's a bit more natural is getting an actual tandem. This is a person you can talk to, a real person. So this can be in real life or it can be through apps. For example, Tandem app. This is Tandem, the way it sounds. Tandem. Tandem app. So you talk to strangers, but it's totally safe. Everybody is there to learn languages. So you speak a little bit in your language, the other person will learn, and then you speak in English, and then you learn. That has the added advantage that's with a native, which is not bad practice. Um, Let me see. So we talked about ChatGPT. We talked about shadowing. We talked about self-talk. This one is a very, very important one. Even though it looks a bit ridiculous, it looks a bit funny, but trust me, it's really good. It really pushes you forward. Um, and the last one is maybe talking to a friend. And this is a bit more difficult because you have to have a friend who speaks English and who speaks English. They don't have to speak incredibly well, but the difficult bit is switching. So if you're used to speaking in your language, then you'll have to switch to speaking in English. But I have some friends who are totally open to it because they also want to learn and they're also interested. So if they're also learning, you can propose it, and maybe you don't speak the whole conversation in English, but you have a little part of the conversation in English that will also help you a lot. So the big takeaway of today is try to have as much English in your real life as possible, but that is meaningful English, right? So not words like door and window and salt and pepper, but really try to make sentences, try to make sense of what you're saying, try to repeat what other people are saying, paying attention to the intonation, to how they are speaking, so that you always have a little challenge and you don't stay on a plateau of learning, which might happen if you learn the object of the house, because at some point the objects also, you run out of objects. Yeah, you know all the objects, for example. So that will be my big takeaway of today. I would like you to start thinking and English on your day-to-day basis, and continue also with learning in sprints. But having this basis of learning as a habit will really push you forward. Anyway, have a good evening and see you next video. Bye. Let me finish this. Whoop.